This window of like guys who would be friend zoned and just be waiting in the wings like little puppy dogs, waiting to like get a call from her to come on over and maybe hang something on the wall for her. Or maybe, make sure that this works or that works in her house, just hoping and praying that in doing that for her, she's going to somehow reward you with like a date or I don't know, a night or something. And then she in turn says, "Oh, thanks for doing all that for me. See you later. Bye." Right? The guys got tired. Guys are done being friend zoned. They're done being used and friend zoned, invited over to be his I don't need a man.
This is their fate. Now it's too late. Women who embraced feminism and prioritized careers over family are now alone, broken, and filled with irreversible regret. This stark reality is unfolding across generations as countless women wake up to the emptiness of their choices, realizing too late that the promises of independence and empowerment have left them isolated in a world that no longer offers second chances. As we delve into the profound shifts in society today, you will uncover the undeniable patterns of decisions that lead to this outcome. The quiet revolution among men who have chosen peace over pursuit, and the economic and social forces amplifying this divide, all building toward a revelation that explains why true fulfillment demands a return to fundamental human connections if anyone hopes to avoid the same fate. Stick around to the very end, because what you will discover about the unbreakable peace men have found and the irreversible collapse awaiting those who ignore these truths will change how you view every relationship and life choice forever. Consider the landscape of modern life where decisions made in youth echo through decades, shaping destinies in ways that no amount of hindsight can alter. Women in their prime years, influenced by waves of feminist ideology, turned their focus toward education, professional advancement, and personal freedom, often at the expense of building families and nurturing long term partnerships. They pursued degrees, climbed corporate ladders, and embraced lifestyles centered on self fulfillment, believing that these paths would deliver lasting satisfaction and security. Yet, as time marches on, a growing chorus of voices from older women reveals a different story, one filled with profound sorrow over opportunities missed, children never born, and relationships never solidified. These women now share their experiences on social platforms, admitting that the thrill of independence faded into a hollow existence, where solitude replaces the warmth of family bonds and regret becomes a constant companion. They speak of divorces initiated out of boredom or a sense of entitlement, convinced that something better awaited them, only to find that the world moved on without offering the rescues they anticipated. This pattern is not isolated, but widespread, affecting millions who bought into the narrative that men were optional competitors rather than essential partners, that domestic life was a trap to avoid, and that career success could substitute for the deep human need for legacy through children and shared lives. The consequences are evident in statistics that paint a grim picture, with half of women under 30 in Western societies currently childless, and projections indicating that more than half will never become mothers, leading to an overwhelming majority expressing regret in their later years. This regret manifests as a deep seated loneliness, where the absence of family leaves them vulnerable, without the support networks that once defined the human existence. They find themselves booking tables for one, traveling solo, and facing financial hardships without the shared burdens that partnerships provide, all while acknowledging that their sharp intellects and competitive spirits pushed away potential companions who could have offered stability and joy. The irony lies in how these choices, once celebrated as empowerment, now trap them in cycles of isolation, where casual encounters provide fleeting distractions but no lasting connections, and the body counts accumulated in youth leave emotional scars that hinder genuine intimacy. Society promised them everything through self reliance, but delivered only fragments, forcing a reckoning with the biological and emotional realities that no ideology can override. Now turn your attention to the men in this equation who have observed these shifts and responded with a quiet but resolute withdrawal that reshapes the entire social fabric. For decades, men endured demonization through movements that painted them as oppressors, predators, or obstacles to progress, enduring false accusations, biased legal systems and divorces, and a culture that demanded they prove their worth at every turn while receiving little in return. They approached women in public spaces, gyms, workplaces, bars, and cafes only to face rejection laced with disdain, labels of creepiness, or threats of harassment claims that could ruin careers and reputations. In response, men listened to the repeated messages to leave women alone, to respect boundaries, and to stop pursuing. And they complied in ways that no one anticipated. They walked away from the chase, finding solace in solitude, hobbies, travel, and self improvement, building lives of simplicity and comfort that prioritize personal peace over relational turmoil. This movement is not born of fear, but of clarity, as men realize that the risks far outweigh the rewards in a system stacked against them, where marriages end in asset losses, child support battles, and emotional exhaustion. They have discovered that life without the constant pressure to provide, protect, and perform for ungrateful partners allows for true luxury, whether through minimalist living, international relocations to more welcoming cultures, or forming bonds with like minded friends who value loyalty without drama. Inflation soars, rent burdens increase, food prices climb, and economic pressures mount. Yet men navigate these challenges independently, unburdened by the expectations to support others who once dismissed them. Women, facing these same hardships, now grapple with survival without the traditional safety nets of husbands or boyfriends, turning to social media to plead for men to return, to engage, to rescue them from the isolation they helped create. But men have found their equilibrium, embracing routines that foster mental health, financial stability, and freedom, refusing to re enter a game where they are perpetually cast as villains. This withdrawal extends beyond dating into broader society, where men opt out of roles that once defined masculinity, such as stepping in to fix problems or maintain infrastructure, leading to a gradual unraveling of the systems that relied on their participation. The economy teeters, communities fracture, and the state, once positioned as a provider in place of men, strains under its own weight, unable to fulfill the promises made to those who traded personal relationships for governmental support. Men watch from afar, content in their choices, knowing that the peace they have cultivated is unbreakable, even as calls for their return grow louder and more desperate. Delve deeper into the roots of this divide, where feminist ideals clashed with innate human desires, creating a rift that widens with each passing year. From the second wave of feminism onward, women were encouraged to view marriage and motherhood as outdated constraints, to compete with men in every arena, and to prioritize individual achievements over collective family goals. This mindset led to delayed childbearing, with many waiting until their 30s or 40s, only to encounter fertility challenges that affect 1 in 3 couples by age 30. It defined as the inability to conceive within a year of trying. The biological clock ticks relentlessly, yet societal narratives downplayed its urgency, promoting careers as the ultimate fulfillment while sidelining the 3 years of dedicated care each child requires for healthy development. Women balanced demanding jobs with the hope of later family life, but found that the two cannot coexist seamlessly, as the energy poured into professional success left little for nurturing relationships or raising children. Regrets surface in stories of women who gambled on casual encounters, high standards, and endless options in their 20s, treating dating like a high stakes game where the house always wins in the end. They accumulated experiences, traveled extensively, and built impressive resumes, but neglected the foundational elements of partnership, such as mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and long term planning. As age advances, the leverage of youth diminishes and the abundance of suitors fades, leaving women to confront the reality that men their age often seek younger partners, while they themselves face a shrinking pool of options. This leads to a profound sense of loss, where the absence of children means no one to call them mother, no legacy to carry forward, and no support in old age. Loneliness creeps in, exacerbated by the lack of friends or family networks, as peers who chose different paths enjoy the fruits of their decisions. Women reflect on belittling men intellectually or emotionally, using sharpness as a defense mechanism that ultimately isolated them, preventing vulnerability and true connection. They admit to casual sex that felt empowering in the moment but left emotional voids, disrupting the natural bonding processes that lead to lasting unions. The contrast with earlier generations is stark, where women in the mid 20th century found happiness in family roles, facing fewer mental health struggles and relying less on medications to cope. Today, over half of young women identify with ideologies that reject traditional structures, with estimates suggesting 27 million in Western countries alone will follow this path to regret, their lives marked by financial instability, unfulfilled desires, and a haunting question of what might have been. Examine the societal collapse brewing beneath these personal regrets, where the fabric of communities unravels as traditional roles dissolve and economic pressures intensify. The state stepped in as a surrogate provider, offering welfare, protections, and incentives that encouraged women to forego men in favor of independence. But now budgets strain, resources dwindle, and the promises prove unsustainable. Inflation erodes purchasing power, housing costs skyrocket, and daily necessities become luxuries, forcing individuals to confront survival without the buffers of shared households or dual incomes. Women, once assured that careers would secure their futures, discover that professional success does not equate to emotional or practical support, leaving them to manage alone in a world designed for collaboration. Men, having walked away, no longer fill the gaps, refusing to rescue a system that vilified them for 50 years through campaigns that amplified divisions and eroded trust. This withdrawal manifests in empty public spaces where approaches cease, conversations falter, and connections fail to form, amplifying isolation for all. Yet men adapt with resilience, relocating to environments that value their contributions, building networks based on mutual respect, and embracing lifestyles that emphasize self sufficiency over sacrifice. They find joy in simple pursuits, from fitness routines to creative endeavors, unencumbered by the chaos of unbalanced relationships. Women, in contrast, plead for change, acknowledging that their demands for perfection, taller, richer, more attractive partners, led to perpetual dissatisfaction and partner switching, never settling long enough to build something enduring. The greed for more excitement, more options, more validation backfires as age sets in, transforming abundance into scarcity and confidence into bitterness. Projections warn that 45% of women will be single and childless by 2030, a statistic that underscores the urgency of reevaluating priorities before it's too late. This trend fuels a broader disconnection where humanity splits into parallel paths, one rooted in faith, community, and natural bonds, the other mired in fear, ego, and artificial validations. The collapse is not dramatic, but insidious, marked by vacant businesses, broken families, and lost cultures, as high costs drive out community staples and force reliance on impersonal systems. Men choose peace, honoring their needs for respect and stability, while urging a return to balanced dynamics where feminine and masculine energies complement rather than compete. Reflect on the mechanisms that perpetuate this cycle, starting with the addiction to instant gratification that social media fosters, drawing women into loops of attention seeking and comparison that undermine real world commitments. Platforms amplify the illusion of endless choices where likes and messages substitute for meaningful interactions, leading women to prioritize short term thrills over long term investments. They engage with multiple suitors simultaneously, enjoying the validation, but avoiding the effort required for depth, such as compromising, supporting, or building together. Relationships fizzle after months when the initial excitement wanes, replaced by boredom or the allure of new prospects, perpetuating a pattern of transience that leaves no room for family foundations. As women age, this approach reveals its flaws, with diminished physical appeal, reducing the leverage once wielded effortlessly, forcing a confrontation with the reality that men value youth and vitality in partners. The entitlement bred by youth, expecting men to chase, pay, and perform without reciprocal value, evaporates, leaving women to offer more than appearances, such as peace, loyalty, and partnership skills honed through self development. Yet many resist this shift, clinging to delusions that protect fragile egos, refusing to acknowledge how their actions mirror the criticisms they level at men. This dynamic creates a standoff where men, tired of being misunderstood or used as emotional crutches, opt for solitude, mastering their lives through discipline and purpose. They recognize that true fulfillment comes from within, not from chasing validation in unbalanced equations, and they build resilience against the chaos that modern dating introduces. Women express frustration at the lack of approaches, blaming movements that heightened awareness of consent and boundaries, but overlooking how their own responses, shaming respectful advances or demanding unrealistic standards, contributed to the chill. The result is a generation grappling with loneliness, where genuine connections become rare commodities in a sea of guarded interactions. Men advise focusing on self improvement to attract quality partners, emphasizing that average efforts no longer suffice in a competitive landscape, while women must cultivate femininity and substance to stand out. The irony persists. Women who once reveled in independence now yearn for the stability they rejected, but the bridges burned through years of dismissal prove hard to rebuild. Ponder the vulnerability that accompanies these regrets, particularly as women enter later stages of life without the protections family provides. Isolation breeds prey like conditions where the absence of watchful eyes from spouses or children leaves room for exploitation, financial scams, or health neglect. Statistics highlight this risk, with 1 in 4 women potentially facing such scenarios, their lives marked by terror over unsecured futures and dependence on straining social services. Careers, once the beacon of security, offer no solace in retirement without pensions built alongside family planning, leading to broke existences despite years of labor. Women recount spending on experiences over investments, prioritizing fun over foundations, only to find themselves destitute and friendless. The mental toll is immense, with higher rates of prescriptions needed to maintain equilibrium in a world that promised happiness through autonomy, but delivered anxiety instead. Men, observing this, reinforce their resolve to avoid entanglements that could drag them into similar pits, choosing instead to safeguard their sanity and wealth. They form alternative support systems, from friend groups to relocation strategies, adapting to singlehood with grace that women often struggle to match. This adaptation stems from a pragmatic view. Relationships do not improve with age as differences amplify and opportunities narrow to perhaps five viable chances for lasting bonds. Delaying decisions multiplies regrets as the window for family closes while careers demand undivided attention. Women who insisted on biological children without adoption face the harshest realizations, their desires for legacy thwarted by time. The narrative shifts toward acceptance, where men embrace their paths without bitterness, recognizing that peace trumps pursuit, and society must evolve or fracture further. The call echoes for balance, where choices align with natural rhythms rather than ideological extremes, ensuring survival through connection over competition. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Explore the psychological underpinnings that sustain this growing separation between men and women in contemporary society, where trust has eroded to near non existence and mutual understanding seems increasingly out of reach. Men have internalized the lesson that approaching a woman in any context carries substantial risk, including potential professional repercussions, social ostracism, or legal entanglements, even when intentions remain entirely respectful and benign. This realization has prompted a collective shift towards self preservation, where men prioritize mental clarity, emotional stability, and financial security over the pursuit of romantic connections that frequently end in disappointment or worse. They channel their energy into personal development, physical fitness, intellectual pursuits, and career advancement, secure in the knowledge that these endeavors yield predictable positive returns without the volatility introduced by modern dating dynamics. Women who once benefited from the attention and provision of men now encounter a landscape where that attention has vanished, replaced by indifference that feels punishing, yet stems directly from years of communicated disinterest and hostility. The pleas that appear on social platforms asking why men no longer approach or initiate reflect a dawning awareness that the boundaries so fervently enforced have become permanent barriers. Men respond not with anger, but with quiet acceptance, having recalibrated their expectations to align with reality rather than fantasy. They recognize that genuine partnership requires reciprocity, respect, and shared values, elements increasingly scarce in environments saturated with entitlement comparison and transactional thinking. This recalibration allows men to thrive in solitude, cultivating habits that promote long term well being, such as disciplined routines, meaningful friendships, and pursuits that foster a sense of accomplishment, independent of external validation. The contrast becomes stark when juxtaposed against the experiences of women who find themselves navigating the same economic turbulence without the complementary strengths that balanced partnerships historically provided. Housing costs continue to climb, wages stagnate relative to inflation, and the dual income model that once offered breathing room now feels essential yet unattainable for many single individuals, particularly women who delayed family formation in favor of career trajectories that promised independence but delivered precarity instead. The state that positioned itself as a reliable alternative provider faces mounting deficits, forcing reductions in services that women once counted on to offset the absence of personal support networks. This convergence of factors creates a pressure cooker environment where regret intensifies, not merely as an emotional state, but as a practical crisis demanding solutions that ideology alone cannot supply. Men observing from the periphery maintain their distance, understanding that re entering the fray under current conditions would likely reproduce the same imbalances that prompted their exit in the first place. They have tasted the freedom that comes from owning their time, their resources, and their emotional energy without the obligation to constantly prove worthiness or absorb criticism disguised as empowerment rhetoric. This freedom manifests in tangible ways, from extended periods of travel to investments in personal health to the simple luxury of uninterrupted focus on goals that matter deeply to the individual. Women confronting the emptiness of their choices begin to articulate what they truly require, yet find that the men capable of providing those elements have already constructed lives that no longer include space for disruption. The narrative of female empowerment that dominated public discourse for decades promised liberation through self sufficiency, but overlooked the fundamental human need for interdependence, where strengths complement weaknesses and burdens are shared rather than borne alone. Biological realities further complicate the picture as fertility declines sharply after 35, with success rates for assisted reproduction dropping dramatically beyond that threshold. Women who postponed motherhood in pursuit of professional milestones discover that the body adheres to timelines indifferent to career ambitions or societal approval. The emotional weight of this discovery compounds the practical difficulties, leading to a cascade of secondary regrets, including strained family relationships, diminished social circles, and a pervasive sense of having missed the opportunity to experience one of life's most profound dimensions. Men who chose fatherhood earlier or who opted out entirely avoid this particular anguish, focusing instead on legacies built through mentorship, creative output, or community involvement that do not depend on biological offspring. Their paths diverge sharply, illustrating how divergent priorities in youth produce vastly different outcomes in maturity. Society as a whole feels the reverberations of these individual choices, with birth rates plummeting below replacement levels. In most developed nations, aging populations, straining pension systems, and cultural continuity threatened by the absence of younger generations to carry traditions forward. The men who have walked away contribute to this demographic shift not out of malice, but out of rational self interest, recognizing that the costs of participation outweigh the benefits in a system that penalizes rather than rewards traditional masculine roles. They build parallel structures, whether through digital communities, intentional living arrangements, or relocation to regions that still value family oriented dynamics, choosing environments where their contributions receive appreciation rather than suspicion. This strategic withdrawal accelerates the fragmentation already underway as public spaces grow quieter. Interactions become more guarded, and the organic formation of relationships gives way to algorithm driven matching that prioritizes superficial criteria over substantive compatibility. Women adapting to this new reality face the challenge of rebuilding appeal in a market that has shifted dramatically, where youth beauty and receptivity, once guaranteed options, now require supplementation with humility, kindness, and genuine partnership skills that many find difficult to cultivate after years of conditioning toward competition and self assertion. The process demands introspection, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about past behavior patterns that once seemed justified but now appear short sighted. Those who undertake this work sometimes succeed in attracting quality partners, yet the numbers remain small compared to the scale of the regret expressed across platforms and personal testimonies. Men, meanwhile, reinforce their boundaries, maintaining that peace once achieved proves too valuable to jeopardize for uncertain prospects. They emphasize personal responsibility, urging individuals of both sexes to align actions with long term desires rather than short term impulses or cultural pressures. This message resonates within male spaces where discussions center on disciplined purpose and the cultivation of inner strength as antidotes to external chaos. The broader culture continues to promote narratives of endless possibility and individual supremacy, yet the lived experiences of millions contradict these claims, revealing instead the limits of autonomy divorced from connection. Economic pressures compound these tensions as dual income households become the norm for financial survival. Yet the formation of such households grows increasingly difficult amid mistrust, mismatched expectations, and competing priorities. Men who once shouldered disproportionate financial burdens now question the wisdom of doing so when reciprocity appears lacking and legal frameworks offer little protection against exploitation. They redirect resources towards self sufficiency, preparing for futures where reliance on others carries unacceptable risk. Women discovering the fragility of standalone provision seek alternatives, yet encounter a diminished pool of willing participants who view commitment through the lens of potential loss rather than mutual gain. The impasse persists, fueling a cycle of frustration, isolation, and incremental societal decline, where institutions designed around family units struggle to adapt to populations increasingly composed of disconnected individuals. The path forward requires honest acknowledgement of these realities rather than continued denial or blame shifting. Men have demonstrated through their actions that withdrawal serves as both protection and protest signaling that fundamental changes must occur before re engagement becomes viable. Women who heed this signal and adjust accordingly stand a chance of reversing personal trajectories, though collective reversal demands broader cultural realignment that prioritizes interdependence over isolation, mutual respect over suspicion, and long term investment over immediate gratification. Until such shifts materialize, the divide widens, the regrets deepen, and the consequences ripple outward, affecting not only personal lives, but the very structure of communities, economies, and civilizations built upon the foundation of stable families. Consider the role of cultural messaging in shaping these outcomes, where media, entertainment, and educational institutions consistently portrayed traditional relationships as restrictive while glorifying single independent lifestyles as the pinnacle of achievement. Young women absorbed these messages, internalizing the belief that marriage represented compromise. Motherhood entailed sacrifice, and career success offered unalloyed fulfillment. Popular narratives featured ambitious heroines who conquered boardrooms, rejected domesticity, and thrived in solitude, reinforcing the notion that men served primarily as optional accessories rather than essential collaborators. This conditioning persisted through decades, influencing decisions about education, dating, marriage, and family timing, with consequences that only become fully apparent in middle age and beyond. Men, meanwhile, received parallel messages that labeled traditional masculinity as toxic, emphasized emotional labor as obligation, and framed provision as entitlement rather than partnership. The cumulative effect eroded mutual goodwill, creating suspicion where trust once existed, and defensiveness where openness prevailed. As these generations matured, the promised rewards of this cultural framework failed to materialize, leaving many women confronting midlife with impressive credentials yet profound emptiness, and men opting for minimalism rather than martyrdom. The disparity highlights a fundamental mismatch between ideological promises and human nature, where the drive for connection, legacy, and belonging persists despite efforts to suppress or redirect it. Attempts to redefine family through alternative structures often fall short of providing the depth and continuity that biological kinship offers, leading to further experimentation and disappointment. Men observing these patterns reinforce their commitment to self directed lives, finding satisfaction in pursuits that align with personal values rather than societal expectations. They invest in health education, travel, and creative expression, building richness that does not depend on relational status. This approach yields measurable improvements in well being with lower rates of stress related illness, greater financial independence, and stronger resilience against economic downturns. Women attempting similar strategies frequently encounter barriers stemming from biological differences, career interruptions related to potential family considerations, and societal judgments that remain harsher toward single childless women than toward their male counterparts. The asymmetry fuels additional resentment, yet also underscores the necessity of honest dialogue about sex differentiated realities rather than insistence on complete interchangeability. Progress lies in recognizing these differences as complementary rather than competitive, allowing individuals to leverage strengths without diminishing others. Men who have embraced solitude demonstrate that fulfillment remains accessible outside traditional frameworks, yet they acknowledge that such paths suit certain temperaments better than others. Those inclined toward family life express willingness to engage when conditions support healthy dynamics characterized by respect, reciprocity, and shared purpose. Until those conditions emerge, withdrawal continues serving as both survival strategy and catalyst for change. Economic realities accelerate this process as rising costs demand efficiency and cooperation. Yet cooperation requires trust currently in short supply. Communities once sustained by informal networks of mutual aid now rely on formal institutions increasingly overburdened and impersonal. The resulting isolation amplifies mental health challenges, with loneliness recognized as a public health crisis comparable in impact to smoking or obesity. Interventions focused on individual therapy or medication address symptoms but leave root causes untouched. Structural solutions demand cultural reevaluation of priorities, placing greater value on relationship building, family formation, and intergenerational continuity. Men positioned at the forefront of this reevaluation through their disengagement force society to confront the consequences of devaluing masculine contributions. Their absence from dating markets, public spaces, and civic roles creates voids that artificial substitutes struggle to fill. Women navigating these voids experience the practical limitations of ideology when confronted with everyday challenges that benefit from partnership. The stories shared online serve as cautionary tales, illustrating how delayed awareness leads to irreversible outcomes. Younger generations watching these narratives unfold face the choice of repeating patterns or charting different courses informed by hard won lessons. Some women reject the extremes of previous waves, embracing balanced approaches that honor both ambition and affiliation. They cultivate femininity alongside competence, seeking partners who value collaboration over conquest. Men respond positively to these shifts, finding motivation to re engage when interactions feel safe, respectful, and genuinely reciprocal. This emerging minority demonstrates that course correction remains possible on an individual level. The widespread transformation requires sustained effort across institutions and generations. The current trajectory points toward continued contraction unless deliberate efforts redirect momentum toward reconnection grounded in reality rather than rhetoric. Men who have found peace guard it carefully, yet extend invitations to those willing to meet them on terms of mutual honor. The ball rests in the court of those who once demanded independence, now discovering its hidden costs. Whether they choose to adapt or double down determines not only personal destinies, but the broader fate of societies built on the interplay of masculine and feminine energies working in harmony rather than opposition. Examine the economic dimensions more closely, where the withdrawal of men from traditional provider roles coincides with unprecedented levels of household debt, student loan burdens, and stagnant real wages, creating conditions that punish single income living, regardless of gender. Women who anticipated lifelong career progression discovered that glass ceilings persist mid career interruptions for any reason, prove costly, and industries demanding constant availability favor those unencumbered by family obligations. The promise that education would guarantee security proves hollow for many as degrees accumulate without corresponding income growth, leaving graduates servicing debt well into their 40s. Men facing similar pressures respond by minimizing obligations, maximizing savings, and pursuing geographic arbitrage, moving to lower cost regions or countries where their earnings stretch further and lifestyles remain comfortable. This mobility enhances their independence, reinforcing the decision to remain unpartnered unless exceptional circumstances arise. Women, attempting comparable strategies, encounter greater constraints, including safety concerns, social expectations, and biological timelines that limit flexibility. The disparity widens economic inequality between the sexes in unexpected ways, with men accumulating assets while women contend with higher living costs relative to income. Retirement projections grow bleak for those without dual contributions or substantial personal savings, particularly in systems shifting responsibility from state pensions to individual accounts. The intersection of these financial realities with emotional regret creates a compounding effect where loneliness merges with insecurity, amplifying despair. Men insulated from this particular combination through disciplined financial habits and lower relational overhead maintain optimism about their futures. They view current hardships as temporary challenges navigable through adaptability rather than existential threats. This mindset allows continued focus on self mastery without the distraction of rescuing others from consequences they helped engineer. Society grapples with the implications as tax bases shrink, dependency ratios worsen, and innovation slows in environments lacking the stability that family units historically provided. The men who walked away embody a form of civil disobedience, refusing to subsidize systems that penalize their participation. Their example inspires others to question default assumptions about duty obligation and reward, prompting broader reevaluation of social contracts. Women who recognize this dynamic face the difficult task of rebuilding credibility in environments where trust must be earned rather than assumed. Those who succeed often do so by demonstrating consistent value through action rather than declaration, cultivating peace, loyalty, and supportiveness that stand in contrast to previous patterns. Men respond to authenticity, finding motivation to invest when reciprocity appears genuine and sustainable. This small scale reconciliation offers hope, yet remains dwarfed by the larger trend toward separation. Economic necessity may eventually force larger realignments as survival imperatives override ideological preferences. Until then, men continue optimizing for personal sovereignty. Women confront the limits of autonomy in society, navigates the slow motion unraveling of structures reliant on assumptions no longer valid. The outcome hinges on whether enough individuals choose adaptation over entrenchment before tipping points render reversal impossible. delve into the spiritual and existential layers where the absence of family and legacy leaves a void that material success cannot fill. Men who opt for solitude often discover deeper purpose through philosophical inquiry, creative expression, or service to causes larger than self finding meaning that transcends personal relationships. Women confronting childlessness in later years frequently report a persistent ache rooted in the knowledge that their genetic line ends with them, and no one will carry forward their values, stories, or traditions. This existential sorrow compounds physical and financial challenges, creating a multifaceted crisis that demands acknowledgement rather than dismissal. Cultural efforts to redefine fulfillment through career pets or activism provide temporary distraction but fail to satisfy the primal drive toward reproduction and continuity. Men sidestep this particular grief by redirecting legacy building toward mentorship influence or cultural contribution understanding that impact extends beyond biology. Their approach highlights the diversity of paths available when societal scripts lose prescriptive power. Women seeking similar redirection face steeper hurdles, including societal judgment and internal conflict over unfulfilled instincts. The tension between ideology and instinct fuels ongoing debate, with some insisting that fulfillment remains possible without children, while others concede the unique, irreplaceable nature of parenthood. Data on happiness levels across life stages suggests that parents, especially mothers, experience dips during child rearing years, but report higher long term satisfaction and purpose compared to childless counterparts, particularly in old age. This pattern challenges narratives that equate independence with superior well being, urging a more nuanced understanding of trade offs inherent in every major life decision. Men armed with this awareness choose paths that maximize personal agency, minimizing exposure to risks they deem unacceptable. Their collective choice accelerates cultural shifts, forcing reconsideration of assumptions that once went unquestioned. The conversation evolves from blame to analysis as individuals seek practical strategies for navigating a landscape profoundly altered by decades of social experimentation. Those who thrive demonstrate the power of intentional living aligned with core values, whether those values emphasize solitude, connection, or balanced integration. The key lies in ownership of consequences rather than evasion or projection. Men model this ownership through their steadfast refusal to return without fundamental changes. Women who embrace similar accountability position themselves for potential reconciliation or dignified acceptance of chosen paths. Society benefits when both sexes pursue truth over comfort fostering environments where honest dialogue replaces performative posturing. The journey toward resolution remains arduous yet necessary if civilization hopes to restore equilibrium before irreversible decline sets in. Investigate the ways in which educational systems have reinforced this separation by promoting narratives that prioritize individual achievement and self expression over collective responsibility and relational skills. From an early age, young women receive encouragement to view themselves as limitless in potential, with messages that emphasize breaking glass ceilings, shattering stereotypes, and claiming spaces traditionally held by men. Curricula highlight female trailblazers in science, technology, politics, and business, while often downplaying or critiquing the contributions of men in building infrastructure, maintaining order, and providing protection. This selective focus shapes worldview where competition replaces cooperation and personal success becomes the primary measure of worth. Boys, on the other hand, encounter environments that increasingly label natural behaviors as problematic, requiring suppression of assertiveness, energy, and risk taking in favor of compliance, emotional regulation, and sensitivity training. The result produces generations where women enter adulthood armed with credentials and confidence, yet lacking practical knowledge of partnership dynamics, and men emerge cautious, guarded, and disinclined to initiate in fear of misinterpretation. Universities amplify these trends with courses and campus cultures that frame masculinity as inherently suspect and femininity as perpetually oppressed, requiring constant advocacy and protection. Young women graduate believing that the world owes them equity without reciprocal obligation, while young men internalize the message that their presence alone can constitute harm. This imbalance follows them into professional lives, where workplaces adopt policies designed to minimize perceived risks from men, including strict harassment protocols, anonymous reporting systems, and diversity mandates that sometimes prioritize optics over merit. Men adapt by keeping interactions professional, minimal, and documented, reducing casual camaraderie that once fostered organic connections. Women find these environments sterile and isolating, missing the informal support and mentorship that balanced teams historically provided. The professional sphere becomes another arena where trust erodes and genuine collaboration suffers. As careers progress, women who climbed ladders discover that the summit offers solitude rather than satisfaction, especially when peers form families and divide their energies between work and home. Promotions arrive alongside longer hours, greater stress, and fewer opportunities to build personal lives. Men who advance similarly often do so with fewer distractions, channeling surplus energy into side ventures, investments, or personal mastery that compound their independence. The corporate culture that once demanded male provision now extracts maximum output from all while offering diminishing returns in terms of community belonging or long term security. This extraction fuels burnout across genders, yet manifests differently, with women more likely to express regret over sacrificed relationships and men more likely to quietly detach, seeking exits through early retirement, remote work, or entrepreneurial ventures that grant autonomy. The economic machine grinds forward, powered by individual ambition, but lacking the social glue that family centered lives once supplied. When recessions strike or industries contract, the absence of strong personal networks leaves many vulnerable, particularly those who bet everything on career continuity. Men mitigate this through diversified income streams, portable skills, and frugal habits cultivated during years of single focused living. Women who followed similar strategies without the same flexibility face steeper descents when layoffs occur or health issues arise. The divergence illustrates how life design choices compound over time, turning small differences in priorities into chasms of outcome. Beyond workplaces, educational debt burdens exacerbate these divides, with average graduates carrying significant loans that delay major life steps such as homeownership, marriage, or childbearing. Women who pursued longer degrees in fields with lower immediate returns find themselves trapped in repayment cycles that extend well past peak fertility years. Men in technical or trade oriented paths often enter the workforce earlier with less debt and faster income growth, enabling quicker establishment of independent foundations. This head start allows experimentation with lifestyles that prioritize freedom over obligation. The financial architecture of modern life rewards those who minimize commitments while punishing those who delay self sufficiency in anticipation of future partnerships that may never materialize. Cultural expectations around dating further complicate recovery efforts, as apps and online platforms transform courtship into a consumer experience where profiles compete on superficial metrics, height, income photos, and witty bios. Women inundated with matches grow accustomed to abundance fostering pickiness and disposability thinking, while men face scarcity of meaningful engagement, leading to disillusionment and eventual withdrawal. The gamification of romance reduces human connection to transactions where value gets assessed instantly and discarded swiftly. Genuine interest becomes rare as interactions remain shallow, scripted, and easily replaced. Men recognizing this pattern reduce participation, focusing energy elsewhere, while women lament the quality decline without connecting it to their own contribution to the dynamic. Attempts to return to traditional meeting methods encounter resistance born of heightened vigilance and eroded social skills. Public approaches once commonplace now trigger discomfort or hostility, even when executed with utmost courtesy. Men therefore default to silence, preserving dignity and safety. This silence gets interpreted as disinterest or punishment rather than rational response to repeated rejection. The feedback loop solidifies separation where each side waits for the other to change first. Breaking the cycle requires unilateral action from those who perceive the greater loss. Some women begin this process by softening approaches, cultivating receptivity, and demonstrating appreciation for masculine strengths. These efforts yield results when directed towards men who remain open yet selective. Most men, however, stay committed to their peace, having weighed the probabilities and found solitude superior to uncertainty. Their stance serves as a mirror, forcing reflection on whether current behaviors align with desired futures. Reflection alone proves insufficient without behavioral change, yet change demands humility that years of conditioned independence make difficult to access. The generational handoff becomes critical as younger cohorts observe outcomes and adjust trajectories accordingly. Some young women reject the extremes, choosing earlier commitment, balanced ambitions, and relational investment. They prioritize partners who share values around family stability and mutual support, finding satisfaction in structures that previous generations dismissed. Young men encouraged by these examples show greater willingness to lead when met with genuine partnership rather than competition or entitlement. This minority movement creates pockets of restoration where traditional strengths recombine to produce resilient households amid broader decline. These households often outperform peers in financial stability, emotional health, and child outcomes, demonstrating the practical advantages of complementary roles over enforced equality. Data from longitudinal studies support these observations, showing that children raised in stable two parent environments exhibit better academic performance, lower behavioral issues, and stronger social skills compared to those from fragmented or single parent settings. The benefits extend into adulthood with higher earnings, greater life satisfaction, and reduced reliance on public assistance. Societies that maintain higher rates of intact families weather economic shocks more effectively, preserve cultural knowledge, and sustain population levels necessary for long term viability. Nations experiencing sharp fertility drops face looming crises, including shrinking workforces, overburdened entitlement programs, and diminished innovation capacity. Policy attempts to reverse trends through incentives, subsidies, or propaganda achieve limited success when underlying cultural attitudes remain hostile to family formation. Men understand this reality intuitively, choosing not to participate in systems that extract without reciprocating. Their non participation acts as market feedback signaling that terms require renegotiation. Until renegotiation occurs, withdrawal continues reshaping demographics, economies, and power structures in profound ways. Women who grasp this dynamic face a stark choice: continue down paths of isolation and regret, or pivot toward behaviors that rebuild trust and invite collaboration. Pivoting successfully involves shedding layers of defensiveness, embracing vulnerability, and offering value that men find compelling. This includes emotional support, practical assistance, and consistent respect rather than demands framed as rights. Men respond to such shifts because they align with innate desires for appreciation, reciprocity, and peace within relationships. The transformation, though challenging, produces outcomes far superior to prolonged solitude or serial dissatisfaction. Those who resist change often deepen. Entrenchment doubling down on narratives that externalize responsibility and vilify men, further entrenching the divide. This resistance accelerates decline as fewer stable unions form, fewer children enter the world, and fewer role models demonstrate successful partnership. The trajectory points toward a bifurcated future where one segment maintains continuity through intentional family building, while another drifts into atomized existence, supported precariously by dwindling state resources. Men positioned in the former group through choice or circumstance secure legacies that endure. Those in the latter prioritize present comfort over uncertain futures, accepting the trade off knowingly. Society as collective must decide which path to incentivize through culture, policy, and education. Current incentives favor individualism, consumption, and short term gratification, yet mounting evidence suggests this direction leads to widespread dissatisfaction and systemic fragility. Course correction demands acknowledgement that human flourishing depends on connection, contribution, and continuity rather than isolation, autonomy, and novelty. Men who walked away embody this acknowledgement, living proof that alternatives exist and prove viable. Their example challenges everyone to reconsider assumptions long held sacred. Whether the challenge gets met determines if regret remains a personal tragedy or becomes a civilizational one. Analyze the impact of technology on these shifting dynamics where digital tools both connect and isolate in unprecedented measure. Social media platforms create illusion of community through likes, comments, and virtual interactions, yet deliver superficial engagement that fails to satisfy deeper needs for presence, touch, and shared experience. Women heavily engaged on these platforms often measure worth through validation metrics, fostering comparison envy and perpetual dissatisfaction. Men recognizing the manipulative nature of these systems reduce usage or exit entirely, redirecting attention toward real world pursuits that offer tangible rewards. Dating applications exacerbate this divide by turning partner selection into swipe based judgments where first impressions dominate and nuance disappears. Women receive volume but struggle to convert matches into meaningful bonds due to option overload and inflated expectations. Men face rejection ratios that discourage persistence, leading many to delete profiles and seek fulfillment offline. The net effect reduces organic encounters while increasing cynicism about relationships in general. Communication technology further complicates matters by enabling constant contact without commitment, fostering ambiguous situationships that drain emotional resources without delivering security. Women invested in these arrangements often emerge depleted, having provided intimacy, loyalty, and support in exchange for inconsistency. Men learn to protect boundaries more rigorously, avoiding entanglements that offer minimal upside. The cumulative result produces relational fatigue, where both sexes grow wary of investment, fearing exploitation or disappointment. Technology promised to make connection effortless, yet delivered isolation dressed as convenience. Real world interactions suffer as people become accustomed to curated personas rather than authentic presence. Social skills atrophy from disuse, leading to awkwardness, discomfort, and avoidance when face to face opportunities arise. Men conditioned by this environment default to non engagement, preserving energy for pursuits under their control. Women seeking reconnection find fewer entry points as public social venues empty and spontaneous conversations vanish. The technological layer adds another barrier to reversal, making deliberate effort even more necessary for those hoping to bridge gaps. Individuals who limit screen time, prioritize in person activities, and cultivate face to face skills position themselves advantageously in an increasingly disconnected world. These people often form stronger bonds, build resilient networks, and experience greater satisfaction despite swimming against cultural currents. Their success highlights that technology serves best as tool rather than substitute for human interaction. Those who allow digital habits to dominate frequently report higher loneliness, greater anxiety, and diminished life satisfaction, regardless of apparent online popularity. The contrast underscores fundamental truth that virtual validation cannot replace embodied relationships rooted in shared time trust and mutual sacrifice. Men who internalized this truth early constructed lives rich in offline meaning, from physical challenges, creative projects, to community involvement in analog spaces. Women awakening to the same realization begin reducing digital dependency, focusing on real world development and openness to connection. This shift, though late for some, yields positive results when pursued consistently. The broader culture, however, continues promoting digital immersion as progress, ensuring that most remain trapped in cycles of stimulation without substance. Breaking free requires conscious rejection of default behaviors, choosing presence over distraction, depth over breadth, and reality over simulation. Those who make this choice, whether male or female, discover dimensions of fulfillment previously obscured by constant connectivity. Their paths diverge from the mainstream, yet converge in shared recognition that true richness emerges from intentional living rather than passive consumption. This recognition forms foundation for potential reconciliation where individuals meet as equals, valuing what each brings rather than demanding unilateral provision or deference. Until such recognition spreads widely, technology will continue amplifying separation, accelerating regret, and contributing to societal fragmentation. Contemplate the philosophical implications of these developments, where questions of meaning, purpose, and human nature come sharply into focus. Traditional frameworks rooted in family, community, and transcendence provided answers to existential inquiries, giving individuals sense of place within larger story. Modern ideology replaced these with self actualization, personal branding, and hedonic pursuit, promising fulfillment through autonomy and experience. The experiment now yields results showing that unchecked individualism produces emptiness when stripped of obligation, connection, and legacy. Men who rejected this path in favor of disciplined self governance report higher levels of contentment derived from mastery, alignment with values, and freedom from external drama. Women confronting the shortfall in promised satisfaction grapple with dissonance between ideology and lived reality. Some resolve this by reevaluating core assumptions, embracing aspects of tradition that offer proven pathways to meaning. Others persist in denial, attributing discontent to external factors rather than flawed premises. The philosophical divide mirrors broader cultural schism between those who accept human nature as given and those who believe it malleable through sufficient willpower or social engineering. Evidence increasingly favors The former view as attempts to override instincts produce consistent patterns of dissatisfaction, dysfunction, and demographic collapse. Accepting natural differences allows construction of systems that harness complementary strengths rather than forcing uniformity. This acceptance does not imply hierarchy, but recognizes that masculine and feminine energies operate differently, serving distinct yet interdependent functions. Men thrive when respected for provision protection, and leadership women flourish when cherished for nurturing intuition and relational skill. Imbalance occurs when one side dominates or when either withdraws completely. Current withdrawal of men represents a corrective response to prolonged imbalance, where masculine contributions faced devaluation and feminine demands escalated without reciprocity. Restoration requires mutual recalibration, where respect flows both directions and contributions receive acknowledgement. Philosophical maturity demands acknowledgement that freedom includes responsibility choice, includes consequence, and autonomy reaches limits when confronted with interdependence. Individuals who integrate this wisdom craft lives of depth and durability. Those who resist remain caught in cycles of pursuit and disappointment, chasing illusions of perfect independence. The men who walked away embody this integration, choosing paths congruent with reality over fantasies of effortless fulfillment. Their example challenges prevailing philosophy, urging return to grounded understanding of human needs. Whether society heeds this challenge determines trajectory from here forward. The stakes extend beyond personal happiness to survival of cultures, civilizations, and the species itself. Thoughtful navigation requires honesty, courage, and willingness to adapt rather than cling to failing paradigms. The quiet revolution among men signals that adaptation has already begun on individual level. Scaling this adaptation demands collective recognition that certain truths endure despite ideological fashion. Among these truths stand the necessity of partnership, the value of family, and the fulfillment found in contributing to something larger than self. Embracing these truths offers pathway out of regret toward renewal. Ignoring them ensures continuation of current decline. The choice belongs to each person, yet collective consequences affect all. Men have made theirs clear through action. The response from others will shape what comes next. Trace the health consequences that emerge when entire decades are spent chasing validation instead of building bonds because the body keeps its own merciless score. Women who dedicated their youth to corporate ladders, endless travel, and rotating partners now confront accelerated aging that no filter or procedure can fully mask. Chronic stress from constant performance cortisol flooding the system for years manifests in thinned skin, premature wrinkles, and hair that loses luster far earlier than previous generations. Sleep disorders become commonplace as the mind races through unspoken regrets in the quiet hours once reserved for a spouse or children. Autoimmune conditions flare with greater frequency in those without the buffering effects of oxytocin. Rich relationships, the hormone released through touch, affection, and childbirth that moderates inflammation and repairs tissue. Medical literature now confirms that childless women face 20 to 40% higher risks of certain cancers, cardiovascular events, and early dementia compared to mothers, with the protective effects most pronounced after three or more children. The absence of pregnancy and breastfeeding removes natural resets to the endocrine system, leaving cells vulnerable to unchecked mutations over time. Men who chose solitude generally escape these particular risks, maintaining lower baseline inflammation through disciplined training, fasting, and purpose driven lives. Yet they too pay prices in different currencies, sometimes subtle, sometimes profound. Testosterone levels remain higher without the draining effects of constant relational conflict or family provision stress, allowing muscle retention, cognitive sharpness, and metabolic health well into later decades. They report fewer headaches, fewer gastrointestinal issues, and dramatically lower rates of prescription dependency for anxiety or depression. The contrast becomes visible in social settings where men who walked away often appear 10 to 15 years younger than chronological age, while women who followed the empowered path frequently look 10 to 15 years older than their mothers did at the same milestone. Dermatology clinics overflow with patients seeking reversal of decisions made in ignorance of biological cost, while testosterone replacement centers serve men who never needed to replace what they never surrendered. The body reveals truth long before the mind admits it, and the physical ledger now demands payment in full. Examine the geopolitical ramifications that flow inevitably from millions of individual decisions to forego family because nations are not abstract entities but collections of households. Countries that celebrated the liberation of women from reproduction now stare at empty playgrounds, shuttered schools, and maternity wards converted into geriatric care units. Japan leads the parade of collapse, with entire villages dissolving and corporations sponsoring dating events that yield zero marriages. South Korea posts the lowest fertility rate ever recorded in human history, with the average woman expected to have fewer than one child in her lifetime. Italy, Spain, Greece, and increasingly, the United States watch native populations shrink by hundreds of thousands annually, while politicians speak of immigration as the only possible salvation. Yet immigrants who arrive from higher fertility cultures rapidly adopt the same childless patterns within one generation when exposed to the same incentives and propaganda. Military recruitment pools dry up as the percentage of young men, both willing and physically qualified, plummets below sustainable levels. The United States Army now rejects 70% of applicants for obesity criminal records or mental health issues, a complete reversal from previous eras when service was seen as honorable path to manhood. Entire branches contemplate lowering standards or drafting women to fill gaps, while China quietly builds the largest navy in history, crewed by men raised under one child policy who have no sisters and often no cousins. The strategic imbalance grows by the day, yet Western leaders continue promoting the very lifestyle choices that produced the demographic suicide. Real estate markets begin their terminal slide as households fail to form, and the oversized homes built for families sit empty or subdivided into rentals for single occupants. Pension systems enter death spirals with fewer workers supporting exploding retiree populations until promises made in 1970 become mathematically impossible to keep by 2040. The men who walked away watched these developments not with glee, but with grim validation, having predicted the trajectory years earlier when they were still being called losers for refusing to participate. They position assets accordingly, holding tangible property in stable jurisdictions, precious metals, and skills that remain valuable in any environment, while the broader population clings to paper promises that evaporate with each new bailout or currency devaluation. The great reversal accelerates where those who opted out of the system find themselves uniquely equipped to thrive amid its collapse, while those who bought the narrative most fervently discover their credentials and corporate titles count for nothing when grocery shelves thin or power grids falter. Consider the spiritual warfare dimension that undergirds every statistic and personal story, because this is not merely a material struggle, but a battle for the human soul itself. Ancient texts warned that in the last days, people would become lovers of self rather than lovers of God. And the evidence now surrounds us in abundance. The rejection of covenant, the elevation of desire over duty, the worship of autonomy above all, form the precise spirit of the age prophesied millennia ago. Men who walk away often describe their decision in spiritual terms, recognizing that to chain themselves to women steeped in rebellion would be to yoke themselves unequally and invite destruction into their lives. They speak of peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that settled over them the moment they stopped negotiating with chaos and began ordering their lives according to divine rather than cultural blueprints. Many rediscover prayer scripture and fellowship with like minded men, building parallel societies rooted in timeless principles, while the mainstream culture descends into ever more bizarre expressions of lost identity. Women who reach the end of the feminist road frequently encounter the same spiritual vacuum, having achieved everything promised, yet possessing nothing that endures. Their testimonies describe a darkness that entered when they rejected the role written into their very DNA, a darkness that no promotion, no vacation, no cosmetic enhancement can dispel. Some repent, publicly falling to their knees in recognition that the strong, independent woman was always a demonic deception, designed to separate them from protection, provision, and purpose. Others harden their hearts, further embracing witchcraft, New Age practices, or chemical numbing to silence the screams of a soul that knows it has been lied to on a cosmic scale. The divide becomes eternal in implication because choices made in these decades echo beyond the grave. Men who guarded their seed, their spirit, and their sanity positioned themselves to hear well done upon arrival, while women who traded inheritance for experiences discovered too late that the banquet they attended was filled with poison fruit. Revival sparks in unexpected places among men who refuse the matrix gathering in gyms, warehouses, and private estates to pray, study, and prepare for what comes next. They raise the next generation of sons, if they have them, or mentor young men if they do not, teaching honor, strength, and unwavering devotion to truth. The remnant grows quietly yet powerfully, while the broader culture careens toward judgment, unable to break because it removed the only restraints that ever worked: family faith and masculine strength properly directed. Reflect upon the coming wealth transfer that will dwarf all previous shifts in human history because the men who walked away controlled disproportionate resources relative to their numbers. They own the Bitcoin, the land, the tools, the skills, and increasingly the means of production, while childless aging women and the state that promised to replace husbands face bankruptcy simultaneously. Inheritance patterns break down completely as millions die without heirs, leaving estates to distant cousins, charities, or governments desperate for revenue. Probate courts overflow while auction houses prepare for the greatest liquidation of household goods, jewelry, and real estate ever witnessed. Men with liquidity and clarity acquire assets at fractions of previous valuations, building generational wealth without the drag of divorce settlements, child support, or spousal maintenance. They purchase the four-bedroom homes once filled with children, now sold in distress by women who cannot afford maintenance, taxes, or memories. They buy the luxury vehicles, the designer wardrobes, the art collections, all the trappings of a life dedicated to appearance rather than substance. The transfer occurs silently yet inexorably as the rewards of discipline, patience, and foresight manifest in abundance, while the wages of rebellion reveal themselves in scarcity and humiliation. Younger women who observe this process face the final unfiltered choice: cooperate with reality, and secure provision, protection, and legacy, or continue the rebellion and join the growing ranks of the broken. A small but increasing percentage choose wisely, seeking out men who never compromise their standards, offering submission, peace, and genuine desire to build in exchange for leadership provision and unwavering frame. These unions produce children at rates 3 to 5 times the national average, creating pockets of explosive growth amid general collapse. Their daughters learn femininity from mothers who discovered it through pain. Their sons learn masculinity from fathers who never surrendered it. These families become the new aristocracy, not of bloodline, but of obedience to natural and divine order. They inherit the earth not through conquest, but through continuation, while the rebellious bloodlines simply cease to exist within one generation. The math becomes merciless and beautiful in its purity. Those who multiply inherit, those who sterilize themselves disappear. Stand in awe of the precision with which every promise of the sexual revolution has been exposed as a lie, because every single one inverted reality and every single inversion now extracts its pound of flesh. They said careers would fulfill women, and women now swallow pills to cope with the emptiness. They said children were burdens, and women now weep over barren wombs. They said men were unnecessary, and women now beg men to return while men sip coffee in peace. They said divorce would liberate, and divorced women now live in smaller apartments with cats and wine. They said hookups had no consequences, and bodies now betray the lie with disease, infertility, and attachment disorders. They said gender was a construct, and mental hospitals overflow with confused children who mutilated themselves seeking identity. They said the state would provide, and the state now prints money to pay interest on money printed to pay interest. Every pillar crumbles simultaneously, revealing the architecture of deception that seduced entire civilizations into self annihilation. Men who saw through the lies early now live as kings in modest kingdoms of their own making, wanting nothing that the dying system can offer. They wake without alarms, train without coaches, eat without restriction, travel without permission, and sleep without fear. Their wealth grows quietly. Their bodies remain strong, their minds stay sharp, their spirits rest undisturbed. They need no validation, no audience, no applause, because they possess the only thing that ever mattered: sovereignty over self, earned through decade of saying no when every voice screamed yes. Women who finally see face the brutal arithmetic of remaining fertility years versus accumulated damage standards versus options, pride versus survival. Some swallow the black pill completely and choose the wall as companion. Others swallow pride instead and seek reconciliation on terms they once mocked. A few succeed, magnificently discovering that masculine frame, once surrendered to willingly, provides more security, adventure, and meaning than any corporate title or passport stamp ever could. These women become living testimonies that grace still operates even at the 11th hour, though the window narrows by the day. Finally, brothers who held the line, who endured the ridicule, the loneliness, the temptation to go back just one more time. Massive respect to the 1 hour gang who made it to the end of this beast. You already know what time it is if these angry guy videos are feeding your soul and strengthening your resolve. Then go hit that Red Bull link in the description and buy me a cold one. The wings help me stay up grinding these truths for you. Drop in the comments right now what hits you hardest in this one. Do you agree that the bed is made and they must lie in it? Or do you still see a path back for society as a whole? Speak your mind unfiltered. The community reads every single comment. Like the video if you like it. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA men walking away in cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.